I wasn't on the guest list. Not really, not in the way that mattered. When I arrived at the Whitmore estate in Savannah, red-bricked, columned, and smug as ever, the valet didn't ask for my name. He just looked me over, glanced at the modest sedan I rented from the airport, and assumed I was staff. "Service entrance is around back," he said, already turning to the next Porsche behind me. I didn't correct him. Inside, everything was cream linen and crystal. Waiters in black vests, weaved between Savannah's elite city council members, donors, and the same trust fund families, who'd whispered behind my back since I left town 10 years ago. My mother's voice echoed near the grand staircase, practiced melodic, full of southern grace. She was in her element. The party marked 25 years of her education charity, and tonight the Whitmores were queens of benevolence. Except, of course, for the one Whitmore who served drinks. Camille. Aunt Deirdre blinked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real or a misplaced memory. "Oh, well, you made it." She looked down at the guest badge someone had clipped to my dress, Operation Support. I gave a small smile. "Just here to help." Deirdre recovered quickly. "That's admirable. Your mother will be so pleased. The floral vendor canceled this morning. Maybe you can—" "I'll check with catering," I said, and slipped past before she could assign me to centerpieces. In the kitchen, I picked up a tray of Prosecco flutes. The real staff hired by a third-party event planner I owned through 2 shell companies barely glanced at me. That's how I liked it. Invisible, useful, unthreatening. I stepped into the ballroom just in time to hear my mother's voice. And of course, we're grateful to the anonymous donors whose generosity made this evening possible. Laughter, applause, if they only knew. "Excuse me," someone said sharply. I turned. A woman in emerald silk pointed to a cocktail napkin on the floor. "You missed one." I bent to pick it up. "Of course, ma'am." As I stood, I caught my reflection in a silver punch bowl. Neatly pulled back hair, plain black dress, no jewelry. Not the Camille Blake from the business pages. Not the CEO who signed international art acquisitions before breakfast. Just the girl they remembered from high school. The dropout, the disappointment, the Whitmore mistake. Then I heard her voice, sharp, familiar, and soaked in passive aggression. "Oh my God." "Camille," I turned. Savannah Whitmore, my younger cousin, stunning as always in a backless green gown, clutching a champagne flute like it was a trophy. She smiled like I was a puppy who'd wandered back home covered in mud. "I thought you were in, Thailand or something." I said simply. Savannah turned to the man beside her. "This is Camille. She left to pursue, what was it again? Jewelry design? Import-export. Something creative." He gave me a polite nod. I gave him nothing. "She's helping with the party," Savannah added. "Isn't that sweet?" I smiled. "A quiet one. The kind that comes just before an earthquake. Just happy to be here," I said. And I meant it, because tonight, for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't just in the room, I owned it. "Camille," her voice pitched somewhere between surprise and performative warmth. My mother glided across the ballroom in a champagne-colored gown that sparkled just enough to suggest elegance, not ego. She air-kissed the air near my cheek, like we were brunching at the country club. "You should have told someone you were coming," she said, her eyes flicking to the tray in my hands. "I would have had them assign you something a bit less physical." "I don't mind," I said. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You know how these guests are. They assume. And frankly, the optics." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "Mom," Savannah interrupted, looping her arm through my mother's. "Camille was just telling us about her travels, importing handcrafted stuff from Asia." "That's so niche." My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, at least she's doing something she loves. That's what matters. Isn't that what we always say?" It wasn't. What they always said was, "You had potential, but you wasted it." Dinner service began. I wasn't seated. No surprise there. The long banquet table had name cards, council members, donors, board members of the foundation. My name wasn't among them. I stood at the side with the catering crew watching as my family laughed and toasted one another under the crystal chandelier I'd paid for last winter through Horizon's discretionary fund. I'd bought the chandelier from a French estate sale. The invoice was probably still buried in a file titled Miscellaneous, Anonymous Donor Number 5. Someone knocked into me, a teenage waiter with a tray of duck confit. "Sorry," he mumbled. "No problem," I said. "Keep your elbow in when you turn." He blinked. "You've done this before in another life. Camille, darling." Aunt Deirdre found me again between courses, her plate still half full. "Your mother mentioned you've been working in shipping. With what did she say? Art antiques." I nodded neutral. "Something like that." She leaned in with the conspiratorial tone rich Southern women reserve for scandal and prayer requests. "That must be tricky, financially, I mean." I smiled. "It depends on the market." "Of course." "Well, if you ever need help, there's a wonderful bookkeeping course online. Practical skills are never out of fashion." Before I could reply, my uncle joined her, holding a glass of Merlot and a familiar smirk. "Still avoiding the family business, huh? I suppose I am. You know your grandfather always said, you either run the legacy or get run over by it." "Good thing I wear steel-toed heels," I murmured. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Later in the hallway outside the ballroom, I caught a glimpse of myself in the antique mirror. The same one that hung there when I was 12, listening from behind a curtain as my parents told a guest, "Camille's artistic, bless her heart." That phrase again, bless her heart. Southern code for pitiful but pretty. I stared at my reflection. Dark eyes, neutral expression, perfect posture. I'd built empires from silence, bought buildings from behind curtains, sat across from billionaires and out-negotiated them in 6 languages. But to this house, I was still the girl with paint on her hands and no real direction. A noise behind me, heels clicking. It was Savannah again, flanked by 2 of her friends from Tulane, glossy, gold-throated, and tipsy on expensive rosé. One of them whispered too loudly, "Is she really working the party?" Savannah grinned. "Well, she's not working it." Laughter. Then Savannah stepped forward. "You know, Camille, if you ever want to come shadow me at the gallery, we're expanding. Could use someone who knows shipping and crafts." I said nothing. She reached out, brushed invisible lint from my shoulder. "It's nice to see you doing something, even if it's not what the family expected." "Thanks," I said. "I've been told I'm full of surprises." And I was. They just hadn't seen any of them yet. I stepped out onto the back veranda away from the chandeliers and cackling relatives. The night air smelled like salt and jasmine. Somewhere near the garden hedges, a quartet played polite jazz. It was also curated, so sterile, like everything in this family. My phone buzzed silent, tucked in the inner lining of my dress. I slid it out and turned toward the shadows. The message was from Iris. "Louvre team confirmed. Berlin fund signed. Private vault transfer complete." I typed back quickly, approve. Forward, Paris contact to Roy. Then, almost as an afterthought, still on schedule for 9 a.m. takeoff. A moment later, jet prepped. Chauffeur staged. Security already swept Charleston HQ. Of course they had. When I turned, a voice startled me. "You okay?" It was Marcus, one of the bartenders I'd hired for the evening. Real name Marcus Lai, Yale grad. Former Sotheby's consultant, currently head of acquisitions for Horizon's Asia division. Tonight, in a pressed white shirt and bow tie, he passed us background noise. "Perfect. Better now," I said. He handed me a water glass. "Dehydrated heiress look doesn't suit you," I chuckled. "Everything in place?" I asked. He nodded. "Teams parked 2 blocks away. Contracts prepped. And James says Henderson's people are getting nervous." "They should be," I said. "Because the Henderson Group, the logistics firm my father had been cozying up to for years, was bleeding capital. I'd offered them a soft acquisition last year through a Luxembourg fund. They declined. Instead, they came crawling to my father, trying to leverage his name. And tonight, their CEO was seated 3 places away from my mother, laughing, toasting, unaware that I now owned 41% of his board. You sure you want to do this here? Marcus asked. I stared through the window back into the ballroom. My mother sat beneath a gold-braided banner that read, 25 years of changing lives. She smiled as the mayor leaned in to whisper something. My father poured another drink for a hedge fund manager I once ousted in Geneva. And Savannah, she was dancing, carefree, accomplished, future gallery owner, future wife of someone with legacy, the golden one. I've spent 10 years letting them decide who I am, I said. Marcus raised an eyebrow, and I smiled. Tonight I correct the record. Back inside, I returned the tray to the kitchen. The event planner, technically my employee, was shouting at a server about folding napkins the wrong way. I moved past her unnoticed as always. At the far end of the ballroom, Aunt Deirdre stood with 2 other women near the donor plaque. My name wasn't on it, of course. Just a list of anonymous foundations, shell companies, endowments in honor of forgotten alumni. I'd written every check, funded every scholarship, paid for every panel of that imported Italian marble floor, but to them I was just Camille, the girl who left, the girl who failed. I reached into my clutch and texted one line, "Bring the car around," and prepped the folder. James responded immediately. ETA 5 minutes. Weather clear, ballroom doors unlocked. Perfect. Let the games begin. I re-entered the ballroom just as dessert was being served, sugar-dusted tarts and candied citrus laid out like trophies on silver trays. Savannah had taken over the mic. "Let's raise a glass," she said, eyes shining, "to my Aunt Regina for dedicating 25 years to education and elegance, and to every young girl who dreams of making her mark." The applause was warm, practiced. Everyone raised their glasses. I didn't. Savannah's gaze swept the crowd, then landed purposefully on me. "And let's not forget Camille," she added, a note of irony in her voice. Proof that not every journey is linear. Sometimes, it loops back home. Laughter, light, controlled. The kind that doesn't explode, it erodes. I smiled. Then I set my glass down, walked calmly toward the coat room, and dialed. "James," I said. "You may come in." A pause. Now. The ballroom doors opened exactly 30 seconds later. First came James, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit with a Windsor knot and a small pin bearing the Horizon logo. Behind him, Marcus and the 4 remaining senior members of my executive team. Each of them held a black leather folder. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a dropped wine glass. Savannah blinked. My mother stood suddenly pale. What is this?" James crossed to me and bowed slightly. "Madam," he said. "Clearly your car is ready. The jet has been fueled. London weather is holding, and the Crown team has confirmed breakfast at Kensington instead of Buckingham." You could have heard the room snap in half. I turned to Savannah, who now looked like her tongue had fused to the roof of her mouth. "Thank you for the toast," I said. It reminded me why I don't usually attend these things. Dad stepped forward, sputtering, "Camille, what the hell is going on?" I took one of the black folders from Marcus and handed it to Mr. Henderson, seated near the head of the table. "I believe this is the merger proposal your board rejected last quarter," I said evenly. "Consider this the final offer." Mr. Henderson turned a shade I can only describe as raw disbelief. My father looked at him, then at me. You're behind this." "I always have been," I said. "You just never thought to look." My mother stepped forward, voice trembling. "Camille, why all this secrecy? Why let us think you were a failure?" I offered. Silence. "It was easier," I said, "for all of us." Savannah tried to recover. "Wait, you run Horizon, the Horizon." I nodded once. She swallowed. "But I interviewed for an internship there. They never called me back." I looked at Marcus, who shrugged. We had concerns about tone. I moved to the center of the room now, no longer a shadow, no longer silent. "This event," I said calmly, "was funded entirely by me via Horizon's charitable arm. The Whitmore Foundation hasn't been solvent for years. I've been covering deficits since 2020. Gasps. Again, the chandelier, the catering, the scholarships, even the building you hold board meetings in mine. Then I looked at my father. And Henderson Group, you're not rescuing them. You're being absorbed. Gracefully if you cooperate. Harshly if not. He sat down hard. James cleared his throat. Madam, if we want to keep the London breakfast, we'll need to depart soon. I nodded. Of course. Then I faced my family for the last time. I won't be staying for cleanup tonight, I said. But don't worry, I paused. A cleaning crew is on its way. The silence in the ballroom was no longer polite. It was raw, embarrassed, shaken. I turned to my executive assistant, Eliza, tonight, dressed like a guest but sharp as ever. Eliza, hand me the Whitmore file. She stepped forward, heels clicking across the marble, and placed a thick folder in my hands. I thought you might want the annotated version, she said, with a barely hidden grin. Perfect, I replied. I opened the folder slowly, like turning pages in a history they had never bothered to read. Let's start with something simple, I said, addressing the room. I pulled out a color-coded chart and held it up. This is a breakdown of Whitmore Holdings, the land development arm of the family. Most of you think Uncle Graham runs it. He does not. Graham blinked. You signed power of attorney over to Horizon Asia in 2021. Remember page 6. I handed him a copy. Next, I continued, pulling out a second document. We have the annual funding ledger for the Whitmore Foundation. You may notice line items listed as anonymous donors. That would be me. Every gala since 2019 I paid for. Gasps again. One woman dropped her fork. And this building, I added, gesturing upward, used to be owned by the city. I purchased it through 3 LLCs last October and now lease it at a discount, mind you, back to the foundation. You're welcome. Savannah looked like someone had just erased her from her own story. She stepped forward, desperate. So you what? You've been spying on us, manipulating things. No, I said. I've been protecting your legacy while you polished your image. Then I turned to the final folder, thinner, more specific. Now this one's personal. I pulled a letterhead marked Horizon Recruitment, internal memo, and held it toward the crowd. Last spring, Savannah applied for an executive assistant position in our curatorial division. She was enthusiastic. Savannah flushed red. We declined, I said flatly. Our vetting team flagged several issues, none of them related to her resume. Savannah looked around, searching for allies. There were none. You let me grovel through that interview, she hissed. I let you be who you thought I was, I said, while I stayed quiet and built what none of you believed I could. A voice croaked behind me. It was my father. Why not tell us? I paused, then looked directly at him. Because you never asked. You assumed, and I let you. I closed the final folder. You thought silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant control. Then I turned toward the ballroom doors. James was already waiting. Madam, he said, holding the coat I hadn't brought because I never expected to stay this long. I slipped it on, looked back at my family, and gave them one last truth. Camille, wait. It was my mother's voice. Not commanding this time. Unsteady, thin. I paused at the edge of the ballroom, coat draped across my shoulders, James standing quietly behind me like a shadow that answered only to me. My mother stepped forward, hands clenched. Her composure, always a fine porcelain mask, was beginning to crack. We didn't know, she said. I know, I replied. She flinched, as if those 2 words were heavier than anything I could have yelled. We're still a family, she tried again. We? I asked, my voice quiet but sharper than glass. Because I've been sitting at your table all night, just not as a guest. Dad stood up behind her, moving slower than usual, as if age had caught him just in the past 10 minutes. You should have told us. And if I had, I asked, would you have believed me, or would you have smiled politely and told me to go help with the napkins? Neither answered. Behind them, I could see the others' cousins, donors. Savannah still frozen, still processing that the girl they dismissed was now the one they couldn't afford to ignore. Savannah approached next, no longer gleaming. She looked human, uneven. You played us, she whispered. I tilted my head. No, I let you perform. I just chose when the curtain would drop. But we're blood. Exactly, I said. And yet none of you asked how I was, what I built. You asked me to clean. Her face flushed, but she said nothing. My father cleared his throat. Camille, come back inside, sit, talk. Let's fix this. That's when I knew they still didn't understand. You don't fix a woman who's no longer broken. I have dinner plans, I said. With who I smiled faintly. People who knew who I was before I had to prove it. James opened the door. The winter air swept in clean, cold reel. Before I stepped through, I turned back one last time. Oh, and the invoices, I said, for the catering, the decor, the endowment shortfall. Expect them Monday, since family matters so much. My mother gasped. You can't mean that. I do. Then I gave them a smile they'd never seen on me before. Quiet, steady, unapologetic. The kind of smile a stranger gives you before walking out of a life they never truly belonged to. The hallway outside the ballroom was silent. My heels clicked softly against the marble as I walked toward the waiting car. James kept pace beside me, saying nothing. He never did when I didn't need him to. That was part of what made him irreplaceable. Behind us, I heard the muffled sound of doors closing, voices rising again. The spell was breaking. They'd returned to their wine, their whispers, their need to rearrange the world now that its center had shifted. They'd rewrite the story. But it was too late. I already owned the ending. Outside, the town car was waiting, black and sleek beneath the street lamps. Eliza stood by the open door, tablet in hand. London weather clear, she said. Jet fueled, palace confirmed. And the team prepped a revised proposal for the Berlin acquisition. Good, I said, stepping inside. Send it. She nodded and closed the door behind me. James settled in the front. The car pulled smoothly into motion, gliding past the iron gates of the estate. I didn't look back. As we turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed again. A flood of notifications, missed calls, emails, messages. Mom. Please call me, we didn't know. Dad. About Henderson, we'll talk. Savannah. I didn't mean it like that. I was just delete, delete, delete. I looked out the window, watching the live oaks blur past. Then I spoke, not to James, not to myself, just to the quiet. You know, I said softly, I was never angry about the party. James raised an eyebrow in the rearview mirror. I didn't mind the trays, or the uniform, or even the chores. A pause. Then I smiled. It's just that next time, someone else can serve the drinks. Fade to black. Music swells. Cut.